Hey, what's up everybody? This is Ben Deal, pro triathlete here, and today I'm going to be making a video that I have been excited to do for a while. This is going to be one of those classic pro bike setup videos that probably everyone has seen on YouTube. The main difference here from what you've seen on other channels is that this is not the nicest bike, on the internet, right? This is actually pretty far from it. What I think this is, however, is maybe one of the nicest budget bikes out there. And when I say budget, I really mean budget. There are lots of budget bikes out there in the $3,000 to $4,000 range. I'm not sure exactly how much I spent on this, but as I put together this video, I will include the prices of each component and then a running total, and then by the end, we'll see where we're at. I think it's going to be somewhere a little over $2,000, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, some disclaimers. I put this bike together over the course of about 2 years, right? So some components are newer than others. I probably could have gotten some components a little cheaper. At this point, some of this stuff is dated, so you could even get it for cheaper now. But basically, I just want to kind of show that you don't have to spend a fortune on a triathlon bike to get that free, quote unquote, free speed. Really, I mean, this is the bike that carried me through my entire triathlon career up through now. Who knows, I might even be racing on it this year, but there's also potentially a new bike in the works. So yeah, I've had some great splits on this bike. It's a little bit janky, and I'll point out the kind of more creative spots with it, but honestly, this has been a great bike for me, and any bike like this would kind of suit anyone equally well. So I'll start up at the front and then work my way to the back. But first, I want to talk a little bit about this frame. This is a 2012 Cervelo P3 frame. So this is that classic Cervelo geometry. That means it suits me really well. It's a long and low bike, right? Which there are less and less of these days. So it allows me to get very stretched out. Now this is a size 61, which is part of the reason I was able to get it for so cheap, right? There are just less people buying these bikes, so more people sometimes willing to let them go for really cheap. And I got this bike entirely built. It came with an old Dura-Ace group set and everything, which I've taken off. I've still got laying around, but I clearly swapped it up a lot. Now that fork up there, not the original fork. I replaced the original P3 fork with a P53 fork because the original got cracked in a little accident. So, but I really like the look. It's unique. It kind of gives my bike its own personality, which I'm a huge fan of, and it works just as well as the original fork. I don't think it's more aero or anything, but I like how it looks with that black, white, and then a little bit of red accent there. So I'm gonna go ahead and move up to the front. So up front here, I'm gonna start with this cockpit. I've got Vision Aero bars on it. These are close to their top end bars here. I really like them because they've got a nice semi-integrated design. It's got this stem here that kind of moves really cleanly in with the base bar. I've got SRAM brake levers, and then I've got these Zipp VUCA Alumina EVO 110 aero bars. So these are just aluminum. Great value for the money here, and I really like them because they gave me that extra rise to get my hands a little higher there. Shifter wise, I've got some SRAM return to center shifters. Now, interesting thing there is that only the right one actually works. The left one is completely broken. It's just there ergonomics wise. But because I'm running a 1x setup, I just need that one shifter there. Works really nice, feels good in the hands. As we move back in this cockpit, I've got some just basic arm pads I had lying around, and then I've got this XLab cage here, which I really like that one bottle between the arms setup. It feels really good, it's easy to replace, and then it's got a very nicely positioned computer mount up there as well. So big fan of how that just kind of looks, and I'm able to see it really easily when I'm riding. Now, working down, I've got a Tri-Rig front brake here. This is an Omega X. Tri-Rig is just the gold standard pretty much as far as brakes, simplicity, performance goes, and it looks really clean. So I'm a huge fan of that there. Working back a little bit, I've got this XLab Stealth Pocket. Now, clearly, I elected to go with the one without the Velcro straps. So you can see this is my first 2 zip ties of many that I'll point out as we move back on the bike. I've got 2 zip ties, just keeping it to the top tube there. I think that looks a little cleaner. Probably doesn't make any aero difference, but hey, I did it. Interesting thing in between the stem and this bento here is I did this tri-rig top tube cable routing mod, right? So this is, it was kind of a big move for me. I was a little bit worried, but I drilled that hole in there myself. I just followed Tri-Rig's guide, and it looks really clean, right? It probably makes a little bit of an aero difference, but mostly it's aesthetics. It makes me feel faster. It also makes the bike a little more unique compared to all the normal Cervelos out there. So I taped up the little spot here where this cable normally enters. Electrical tape and zip ties, like my 2 favorite things for custom work on my own bike. To be clear, I am not a mechanic or anything. I have just kind of self-taught myself, or I've just looked up guides on YouTube, of which there are millions. It's a great resource. So big fan of kind of doing a little bit of custom work myself. Now, as we move back, let's go ahead and look at the drivetrain here. So this is pretty much a normal SRAM 1x-road setup. I've got a 52 teeth ring here. I've got a SRAM chain, currently an 11 to 28 cassette on my bike. That was from a very flat, fast race at Indian Wells. But I have gone up to 11 to 36 on the back there if it's a really hilly course. So I've got the SRAM Force 1 medium cage derailleur. That'll suit up to the 11 to 36, works well. It's got the clutch. I have never had a drop train since I've been running 1X here, or drop chain rather. So it's worked really well. Yes, it sticks a little bit more out into the wind, but I don't think that's that big of a deal there. Now, what is a little different is this spider up here. So this is an old SRM power meter crankset here. It fits nicely in with this chainring. Full disclosure, I did receive this as a gift. So I'm not going to include that in the cost of this bike. It's a little bit of a cop-out, I guess, but I did have the original SRAM Force crankset that I got with this, and honestly, you know, this doesn't make the bike any faster. It doesn't make it any more aero. So yes, the power meter is a great tool for training and racing, but it's not necessarily changing, you know, the way this bike functions. Honestly, if I hadn't received this as a gift, then I probably would still not have power on my bike, because yeah, it does add to the cost of it. So super nice to have, but not necessary when you're building up a budget bike. I've got some Ultegra pedals on here. Great, light, stiff, whatever. You can get them at a fairly good price usually. So I just wanted something carbon there because we're triathletes and we love carbon. So I've got this old Dura-Ace brake on the back here. This is what came standard with this bike, so I just left it on there. Fine braking performance, no need to change that up. Now, let's move up to the saddle here. This is probably where I invested the most money, and when I say invested, I mean something that I can transfer on to any future bike. So I went to a bike fitter, tried out a bunch of different saddles, and settled on this Dash saddle. It's super light. It looks very, very nice set up here. And I just liked it a lot. So that'll probably stay with me for years and years. More zip ties here, right? I've got 4 zip ties holding just a basic Amazon bike bottle cage on there. Yes, I could have spent $40 or $50 on an X-Lab setup there, but when 4 zip ties does the job, it's lighter. I think it creates a better angle off the back here. Then why spend that extra money? Here's another zip tie down here, just holding this brake cable kind of closer to the frame. So yeah, zip ties save you money, look cleaner. I mean, really, it's just a great thing to have some lying around. Never like, no harm in putting that on your bike. So let's move on to the last kind of significant part of this bike here, which is, of course, the wheels. These are generic Chinese carbon clinchers from AliExpress, right? This is about as controversial as it gets in the world of high-end bikes. People say, you know, why would you trust kind of a non-quality controlled company with something that, you know, is clearly such a crucial part of the bike? I have not had any issues yet. For me, they're safe. And I honestly wouldn't really have a problem endorsing these wheels for anyone. Whether or not they're fast is a little harder to determine. I've never done any aero testing, but I've also had great results. These are the only wheels that I've ever raced with. I mean, this whole setup is all I've ever known, and I've never had any crashes because of this setup. I have crashed a few times on it. And it's led me to some great results. So tire wise, I opted for a 23 millimeter Continental GP Attack up front for that aero benefit plus good rolling resistance. And then on the back, I've got a Grand Prix TT 23 millimeter, which is just a great rolling resistance tire. I would have gone for 25s, but there's not really clearance on this bike for it, and that 23 millimeter on the front just is a better profile as far as these wheels go. So yeah, I mean, what is kind of the moral of this bike? It's that you really don't have to spend a ton of money to be competitive, even at like the very highest level in this sport. So there are just ways that you can save money all over here, right? So I use zip ties instead of a dedicated cage setup up here. I spent like $400 on my wheels instead of $2,500 on a pair of similar ones from Zip. Not to say that they're equivalent, but you know, they're certainly not worth that price gap in my opinion, partially because I don't have the money for it. Maybe my opinion would be different if I did. What other little things are on here that I did? So what about these skewers up here? Probably the most marginal gain of anything on this bike, but for me it's really more of a mental factor. I know that I'm working so hard that I don't want anything to be holding me back. So when I hop on my bike coming out of T1, I want to know that the only thing that's limiting myself is me. It's not my bike. So that was kind of the whole purpose of building up this bike, is I didn't want any excuses going into a race. Essentially, I can just tell myself it doesn't matter, what you've got is good enough. And that is totally worth the investment that this bike was. And you know, that really over 2 years, that's not a huge investment. So will I ever be able to sell this bike? No, I've crashed it multiple times in training. It's debatable whether it's even safe to ride as is. I mean, it is. I've never noticed any significant issues. There aren't any cracks in the frame that I've seen. But honestly, like, even if this bike was in a shape worthy of selling, I would never sell it. I'll turn it into a glorified commuter or something when I'm done with it, because this bike has gotten me through my first 2 years of triathlon. And it could probably get me through my next 10 if I treated it super nicely, right? And that's all on such a small investment relative to what you can spend on a bike out there. So if you have any questions, if you have any kind of thoughts on this bike, or if you're trying to build up something similar of your own, I'm a huge bike nerd. Honestly, send me a private message on Instagram, find my email address and send it there. I would love to talk about bikes like this. I'm very proud of kind of what this bike is for this money and how far it's gotten me. So yes, not to say I wouldn't love to be on a $10,000 or a $15,000 bike. Is this my dream bike? No, not really, right? But this is my realistic dream bike. This is all that I ever would have been able to afford. It's maybe even a little more than that. But it has served me so well. And it's definitely a good feeling showing up to races, doing super well, and knowing that I didn't spend as much on my bike, right? There's always kind of that factor there. So yeah, I had a blast kind of building up this bike over the past 2 years. I've had more of a blast racing it on it over the past couple of years. And yes, I'm looking forward to riding other bikes. Like I said, I don't have any frame of reference of what it would feel like to ride a nicer bike. So this is the nicest thing I've known, and it has been more than enough for me. So I'm super excited to kind of see where I'll be in the future, but this bike will always have a close place in my heart as the bike that I kind of got to this elite level on. So yeah, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to bring it up with me. And yeah, thank you for watching. Have a great day.